Okay, so this story doesn't get covered much about Extinction Rebellion. You know who they are. They're raising awareness about climate change and the lack of action of governments. And so this was from, what's the month? This April 15th, 2019. London shutdown fears Extinction Rebellion to cause chaos in London today with protests after pledging around-the-clock disruption. So they did it. They did that. And so here's another. It says the Echo Warriors will create human barricades at 5 points. And at the bottom of that picture from the Sun, it says far left mob Extinction Rebellion's plan to bring London to its knees after pledging to carry out around the clock disruption. So here's kind of what they did. You see that boat?
Yeah.
So they would bring these boats into intersections and there, see what I'm talking about? And this is an effort in an effort to shut things down, to raise awareness and force governments to respond to it and act on climate change. And then so that happened. That didn't really get much coverage. I didn't even know about it.
Mm-mm.
And then I'm on the mailing list for the Movement for a People's Party, right? So then I got an email yesterday from them, and at the top of the email it says that youth leaders from around the world have called for a global climate strike and a week of action from September 20th through the 27th. Youth have led the way so far, but now they are calling on everyone to take action alongside them in Washington, D.C. We are answering that call in a major way. On September 23rd, we are going to shut down D.C. That's what it says right there. We are going to shut down D.C. And if you click, see that's colored. So I clicked it, shut down D.C. I clicked it, and it takes you to a website, strikedc.org. And what do they say at strikedc.org? They say on September 23rd, we're going to shut down D.C. We will block key infrastructure to stop business as usual, bringing the whole city to a gridlock standstill. Parents, workers, college students, and everyone who is concerned about the climate crisis will skip work and school and put off their other responsibilities to take action on the climate crisis. Well, you know who's not going to skip work that day? It's the cops. And if you did a little bit farther down on their front page, it has signed the Pledge of Resistance. This September, I will join the climate strike. I will honor the picket line by skipping school or work and putting off my other responsibilities on September 23rd. I pledge to take action with my friends, neighbors, classmates, and coworkers to shut down business as usual so the status quo of delay, inaction, and half measures is no longer an option. I'm going to make the strike a priority. Between now and September, I'm committed to pushing myself to organize my friends, coworkers, classmates, and neighbors to participate in the strike. During the climate strike in Washington, D.C., we will hold ourselves accountable to building creative and strategic nonviolent actions that bring about the world we want to live in. And then here you can sign on. They have all this sign-up stuff. And but here's, and there's a little bit more to this, and here I'll read it to you. It says, we don't take this action lightly. We know that this shutdown will cause massive disruption to people who bear little responsibility for the climate catastrophe we are facing, but we will also cause massive disruption for politicians, huge corporations, and the lobbyists who control our government. We need to fundamentally change the power structure of the United States if we want to stop the climate crisis. We need to fundamentally change the power structure of the United States. Now, I agree that is necessary, but that is such a heavy lift. And the only way you are going to get that done if you shut stuff down and it catches on. So here I'm going to bring on the founder of the Movement for a People's Party and who woke me up to this, or alerted me to this was happening. It's Nick Brana. Nick Brana's here. Hi, Nick. How are you?
Hey, Jimmy, it's great to be with you.
Oh, fantastic. So now you're working with Extinction Rebellion. Your Movement for a People's Party. You're working with Extinction Rebellion. And what do you want to tell people about this?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, youth climate leaders have really taken up, like just in the past year, and very much inspired by Greta Thunberg, who protested outside of her parliament for weeks before anybody took notice. But essentially, I mean, young people have come to the realization that the latest climate science says that we have about 10 and a half years to transform in a fundamental way the way that our society, our economy runs, or we're going to face massive disruption as a result of the climate crisis. We have the potential for collapsing ecosystems, the acidification of the oceans. There are entire nations that are going underwater. Storms are strengthening. And so the potential carrying capacity of the Earth has the potential to drastically shrink as a result of the fact that you have arable land that is becoming desert as you have a changing climate around the world. And so this is it's a tremendous crisis, and you have a generation now, Generation Z in particular, and millennials who are confronting this science, saying that we literally won't have a future unless we tackle this challenge together. And so that's what this is about. This is about going on strike in Washington, D.C., and shutting down the capital city of the most powerful country on earth, while Greta Thunberg and other climate leaders, youth climate leaders, are at the UN Action Climate Summit that is happening on the same day, September 3rd, and telling the world and countries and governments to get their act together.
So this is so dire that people are going to shut down D.C. Do you think you'll be able to pull it off? What do you think is going to happen when you guys try to shut down D.C.?
I do. We've already got hundreds of people signed up to shut down D.C. We're going to block several key intersections into the city, and that means that it's going to bring traffic and business as usual in D.C. to a standstill, basically. And I think that if we have enough people doing this, and I believe that we will, then there will be little that the authorities can do about it. And in fact, businesses may start shutting down preemptively, and people will come out, or they'll cancel school, for example. These kinds of things have happened before when cities have been shut down, and you get massive numbers of people out in the streets. And I should also say that, like you started off by talking about, Extinction Rebellion did this in London in April for about 3 weeks. They brought that city to a standstill. They blocked intersections. They dropped boats in the intersections, turned them into stages. They blocked the tube, the buses. They brought that city to a standstill. And guess what? London, including the Conservative government, declared a climate emergency. I mean, the entire country, the UK did. Canada did as well. And so did New York City after Extinction Rebellion, nonviolent civil disobedience actions.
What's kind of amazing is that there was I do a news show, and I didn't hear about that. That they disrupted the UK for so long, for 3 weeks. That was not covered in the United States as far as I can remember. Ron's here. Ron, did you remember that being covered in the United States?
Very little. We talked about some of Extinction Rebellion's...
Come closer.
Oh, sorry. We talked about some of Extinction Rebellion's activities in London on this show.
Yeah, we talked about some of it.
Yeah, we talked about there was it specifically London that had the naked protest too?
Yes.
That was London? All right. So, yeah, we talked about all that. But
I didn't know about the boats.
I didn't know about 3 weeks.
It got very little coverage in the corporate press and Sunrise Movement, which is like more stateside. They barely cover that at all.
Yeah, right. They're not even covering the Sunrise Movement, right? But
And it's a sorry state because, like our politics, because the supposed left country, party in our country just shot down a climate debate.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. So you're here telling people we need to shut down the city, the capital, because it's such a dire thing. You can't even get the Democratic Party, that's supposed to be the left party, to even have a debate about climate change. They don't even talk about it, right?
Exactly.
And so, what does that tell you, Nick?
I mean, it tells me that part of the reason that as the Movement for a People's Party, we are so excited to be working with Extinction Rebellion is that Extinction Rebellion has 4 principles. The first is just tell the truth about the climate crisis, be upfront about the fact that this is a catastrophe. and millions of people will be pushed across country borders. If we think migration is a problem now, wait until literally the latest UN estimate, 140 million people will be displaced in the next few decades. And so just wait until that happens. Think of what kinds of tensions that will create international between nuclear armed superpowers. Wait until you have water scarcity, food scarcity, also pushing people across borders. So this is a catastrophe. And as the Movement for a People's Party, we are excited to be organizing with Extinction Rebellion and shutting down DC this September because of those 4 principles. It's tell the truth. It is get net greenhouse gas emissions down to 0 by 2025, which is technically possible and what the science and the situation demands. And then also a citizens' assembly to manage the transition and a just transition. Recognizing those people, that the people who are bearing the cost of climate change are not people who have caused the problem. It is communities of color, it's frontline communities. Those are the ones that will actually be forced into migration. And those are the ones whose property values collapse in Florida when it floods. And so the third principle, though, is the one that I find is so key, and that is organizing a people's assembly to manage the transition away from fossil fuels. And that is a recognition that our governmental systems here in the United States are so broken and so despondent and so corrupted by big money that we cannot trust the government as it exists right now to make this transition and make the changes that are necessary.
Yes, I don't think our government is broken, right? As Nellie McKay says, the system's not broken, it's fixed. And so when you have corporations controlling your government, the government is now operating exactly how it's designed to operate, which is to ignore the climate change and to keep pretending like it's not happening so people can fill their pockets with short-term profits as the planet goes extinct. That's what's or as the species go. The planet's not going to go anywhere, I guess, for maybe a couple billion years, but we're going to go places, which is we're dead. We're going to go dead.
That's a really great point.
So, I mean, you talk about people don't realize look at the refugee crisis that we're experiencing right now. Look how it's screwing up Europe. Look what it's done to Brexit. Look what it's doing to so this is a refugee crisis, and that's a refugee crisis caused by largely the West bombing, right? Bombing places like Iraq and Libya. And so you have all these refugees, and that's just, but if you have it on a global scale, you're going to have 150 million refugees pouring into cities all across and it's going to be crazy. And you're right, there's going to be fighting. There's going to be water wars. We have oil wars. There's going to be water wars. And again,
look at what's resulted, Jimmy, from just, the level of kind of migration that exists now. And in a lot of ways, actually, when Bernie Sanders pointed this out on the debate stage in 2016, is the conflict in Syria is a result of water shortages. It's been exacerbated by that, which has been caused by climate change, and so the growth of the far right, I mean, the migration propels, it gives the far right this ammunition that they're, weaponizing against people of color and against society and using that to come to power. Brexit, like you said, is a consequence of that. Trump is very much a consequence, of that. And so the kind of cascading consequences of this are horrific, and I have to say too, because this is happening, just so recently, is that in the Amazon produces 20% of the world's oxygen. The Bolsonaro government over there, which has come to power on, riding a wave of the same kind of xenophobia, essentially, that Trump did and the far right in Europe it has created governmental incentives to basically clear cut the Amazon. And it's terrifying because there is a tipping point at which scientists estimate that the Amazon, and not just part of it, but the whole Amazon will collapse and convert into savanna. And that would release what the Intercept described as a doomsday bomb of carbon and eliminate the biggest carbon sink right now. The fact that the Amazon exists right now is essentially slowing climate change significantly. If that was lost, it would be even more of a catastrophe.
Joe Biden doesn't want to have a discussion about this. You got, and so, and Joe Biden wants you to swallow it and vote for him anyway. What do you say to that?
That's right. He couldn't. It says a lot, Jimmy, that he couldn't even show his face at the DNC meeting. That happened just like a couple weeks ago, because he knew. I think it was this weekend. He knew that, in fact, they were going to vote down that climate debate. And I see what the DNC did as actually very manipulative with the climate debate. Is that, the DNC, the Democratic Party, understands that it's under all this pressure, particularly from young activists, in high school, organizing to try to push the Democratic Party, to be like what it claims to be, this party for working people. And instead, what they did is that they very cynically dangled a carrot in front of kind of climate activists and said, hey, maybe we'll give you a debate, knowing that they could shut it down, and tried to get climate activists to spend all this time pushing for a debate, as opposed to, spending time organizing the climate strikes, for example, and so this is the story time and time again with the Democratic Party, Jimmy. I worked for Environment America in D.C. 10 years ago. And this is when the 2009 climate bill was coming up. This was a cap and trade bill. And I saw the way that, Obama came in promising that it was one of his top 3 priorities. And the Democrats said, yeah, we're going to finally address climate change. We've known about this for decades. 2009. We've known about this for decades. The corporations have known about this for decades. They made drilling plans in the Arctic because of it, And it's like, what they did is they abandoned the plans, Jimmy. They totally abandoned the plans, and it's like the same story over and over again. And that's why that third principle of saying, like after so many decades of entrusting our government to deal with this problem, there has to come a point at which we realize it's fundamentally broken and it's incapable of handling it. And we need the kinds of citizens' assemblies and we need a people's party, to take back that power and declare independence essentially from corporate power.
So let's tell people the dates again. I want to remind people September 20th through 27th is Extinction Rebellion calling, right? They're calling for Action Climate. And what specific day are you joining?
That's right. It's actually the entire Strike DC on the 23rd of September, when we're shutting down the city, is a response to the Youth Global Climate March. And that is being sponsored by Fridays for Future and School Strike for Climate, and all of the different youth climate groups that have really taken off in this beautiful way internationally. And there were 1.4 million young people that went on strike back in March from schools in 123 countries. And now this time, young people are saying that basically the rest of us need to get our act together and join them on the picket line, go on strike with them. And so from that Youth Global Climate Strike on the 20th of September to the 27th of September internationally, that's when we're doing that. The 20th is the launch of that event, and it's a youth climate march taking place in DC and in many other countries and cities. And then we are going on strike on the 23rd. And we're going to do that in solidarity with London, Madrid, Berlin, Paris, Amsterdam, and New York City, which are all going to shut down the cities as well 2 weeks later.
Okay, so they're not going to join in on the 23rd. They're going to do it 2 weeks later in October?
That's right.
Okay. Why don't y'all do it on the same day?
We planned ours to coincide with the UN Climate Action Summit.
Okay.
And because DC is such a symbolic location, in terms of kicking off this kind of, fall, this entire season of nonviolent civil disobedience, and I should say that, like I was alluding to earlier, I mean, we're told that we're supposed to make change in this country, to like adjust our fundamental needs. We're told that we're supposed to, call our members of Congress and senators. We're supposed to write them. We're supposed to petition them, protest. None of that has worked for decades, and so we've got to get in the streets in nonviolent civil disobedience. This is proven to produce change. and it's what we've come to.
Well, the Gilets jaunes, the yellow vests in France, have certainly proven that massive protesting on a large scale works, because they got a lot of stuff done already, and they're still protesting. So they've been protesting, I don't know, something like 30, 40 weeks in a row, and they got a lot of their demands met right away, in fact. So this is actually what's going to work. And this isn't a list. With the great thing about something like this, or the good thing about it's not a left-right issue, right? This is us against them, right? Isn't it? Correct me on the number on this. Isn't it 70% of all climate change is caused by 100 companies?
That is correct. Yeah. And I think it's like 50% by like the top 20 or something.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
So pretending that me washing out my jelly jar is going to stop global warming, that might make me feel good inside. That's not really making a dent. What would really make a dent is a structural change in the world about the way we get our energy, correct?
That's right. Corporations are very good at manipulating us, and by making it appear as if, turn off the faucet when you brush, because that's going to save the climate. No, it's not. Getting off of fossil fuels is going to save the climate, and exactly. So they're interested in all of these different solutions with, they like this greenwashing pseudo solutions that are not really going to challenge their economic bottom line.
What do you think about Elizabeth Warren's greening of the military?
Well, the military is the biggest polluter in the country, and the country's the biggest it's like the second biggest polluter now to China in the world. So I say the greenest thing you could do with the military is drastically scale it down and reinvest that money into healthcare in this country.
Yeah,
and like actually addressing climate change, like maybe making that transition to renewables.
Yeah, maybe. Well, Nick, I appreciate it. Ron, got anything? Ron, you worked on an environmental thing this summer, didn't you? Big campaign?
Well, it was for net neutrality.
That's what it was for? I smoked too much pot, Nick. I thought he was working on a climate change thing. You're working
One could say they're all connected in many ways. If we don't have access to free and open information on the internet, how are we going to find out what's going on with the climate?
Oh,
so there you go. They're connected. So
that is correct.
There you go. But I was going to add, when you guys were bringing up the DNC, I think what it was with the DNC too, big time, and this is pretty obvious to everyone here, but they were trying to protect their anointed chosen ones.
Yes.
They know that Joe Biden in a climate debate would embarrass himself real quick. Same with Kamala, same with even Liz Warren, I think. So they really wanted to avoid that from happening by saying, we don't want to favor any issues here.
Yeah, I like that, though. Bernie finally put his foot down and said we have to have one or else. Oh, he didn't do that?
Let's see which candidate on the debate stage will actually raise the issue and start talking about it.
Well, they got rid of Jay Inslee, right? So he can't.
He was the climate guy.
He was the climate guy.
But Bernie did just put forth a decent Green New Deal. Bernie did do that recently.
Have you seen Bernie's Green New Deal, Nick?
I have, and it's pretty strong, and that's the kind of thing that we need.
Okay, so that
I mean, it still aims for for complete elimination of greenhouse gases by 2050, and that part is too slow, I believe, Yeah. And so there's it's a massive investment. That's the scale of the investment that we need. It was like 16 trillion. But even that is too slow. I think there's a basic point that needs to be made here is that the cost of not addressing climate change, is catastrophic, and it's potentially like human extinction, and it's potentially nuclear conflict, And it's the rise of far-right parties and fascists in countries around the world. And so it just doesn't come close in terms of addressing this,
I agree. It's like, hey, let's take a squirt gun down to the Amazon. I mean, it's just the fact that but we need to get the whole world to go along with it, which that's the great thing about the youth movement, is that they are from all over the world, right?
It is absolutely international. I see, I'm personally very inspired by this because, to me, seeing Generation Z and the way that they are taking on this issue, it's kind of like, I wasn't alive, but to me, it feels like what it must have felt like being in the 60s and seeing those
Yes.
first photos of Earth, kind of like from space, and kind of like the rise of global consciousness that came from that. That's how I think about this moment and this kind of international awakening. Now with the internet, it happens so much faster, that there was back then. It's really inspiring, and it gives hope that this can be taken on. But we have to fight it in the right way. We have to fight it we have to recognize, we have to come to terms that just doing these traditional ways of trying to address it and lobbying our government and asking nicely, and working with the Democratic Party, none of that has worked. We have to get in the streets, and we have to create truly democratic, corporate-free parties, to escape this.
Okay, and remember, no matter what happens next November, you vote for Joe Biden, right? I mean, that's what you're gonna do. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, to be fair to Joe Biden, Ron and Jimmy, Joe Biden can hardly string a sentence together without making a gaffe, and so
Yeah. Well,
you mean you don't remember how good President Your Boss was?
I think Joe, but the joke, he gets support from everywhere. Poor people, white people, they all seem to. Remember when he said that? Did you hear him say that, Nick? He said poor kids are just as good as white kids. Like, what do you say? And then he just said, but imagine if Obama was assassinated. It's like, Joe, stop talking. Stop talking.
And then after that, he couldn't remember Obama's name.
No kidding.
Yeah, that's the latest one. Is he was talking in a speech, and he was, and he reached a point where he was going to say Obama's name, and he just paused.
He said president, and then he paused for a while, and then he said my boss.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
That's what you meant by President My Boss?
Yes, that was what I was referring to.
Apparently, this is the most qualified person to run the country.
This is the front runner.
Worse than Hillary.
He would lose by worse.
Worse than Hillary.
He has more baggage than her, too.
Yeah, he does have more baggage. Okay, so Hillary lost to Obama before she lost to Trump. Biden lost to Dukakis. Think of you had this before you were born, I think, right?
No, it wasn't.
Bro, but Dukakis, could you imagine that? Biden lost. He was so shitty he lost to Dukakis. Dukakis, who lost to George Bush the First, who's actually the Jeb Bush the First.
Has anybody ever run for a president 4 times and made it?
No, I don't think so. Anybody ever? No, even Teddy.
Not that I know.
Well, anyway, so
I'm just amazed, too, Jimmy, that these the centrists and the neoliberals in the Democratic Party, who are just holding on to power with this iron fist, that they think that putting up the exact same thing that voters rejected, is somehow the solution to Trump. It's the person who lost was someone coming out of the Obama administration, and it was a reaction to the Obama administration, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And so let's put up another person in the Obama administration, because apparently people reacted so well to that. And that's what really, gets them inspired into the voting booth.
Well, yes, it's communities of color who feel the most let down by Barack Obama, which is why they let down. Isn't that a funny way they let down Hillary? That's not how it works. Voters don't let down politicians. Politicians let down voters. That's exactly what happened. Hillary was offering nothing, and that's what they gave her in return, nothing. And Joe Biden's doing the same thing. This idea of, Jill Biden, even to the point where she said, swallow it. She goes, you might have principles and your candidate might be better on healthcare or whatever, but swallow it. She's saying this in the primary. They're not even waiting for the general. That's kind of stunning, right? That they're not even waiting for the general. All right.
It's off the chart.
All right. So listen, Nick, everybody, we're hold on. Can you hold on 1 second?
Standing by.
Our lawyer's calling. You want to talk to him?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it just hung up.
Okay, call.
And if I could mention something else too.
Go for it, Nick.
Go ahead, Nick.
Oh, cool. Well, yeah, I should say how inspiringly robust this coalition is too. And so the blockades and the shutdown DC is being organized by a coalition of activists from like there's a wide range of climate and social justice organizations. I mean, it's Extinction Rebellion, it's the Movement for a People's Party, it's 350 DC, it's Rising Tide North America, Chesapeake Climate Action, the Backbone Campaign, Code Pink. So many different organizations that are participating in this. A Friends meeting of Washington Social Concerns Committee. So that is amazing how it's bringing together so many different groups from so many different areas, to coordinate on this nonviolent action.
And everybody should go to, I'll put it up, strikeDC.org. StrikeDC.org. StrikeDC.org, and the big day is going to be September 23rd in D.C. when all those groups he just mentioned are going to come together to shut down D.C., the nation's capital. Now, we talked about this, with Occupy Wall Street, and Nick, why don't you say, what do you think was, how is this different? Why will this be better than Occupy Wall Street?
Right. Well, we're not aiming for an occupation necessarily here. This is about, blocking traffic and bringing it to a halt, and causing mass disruption, because that's what it takes to get the attention of those in power. And it's not necessarily, we have one single day planned of action now. But if we have enough people come out, and the response has already been tremendous. We launched just yesterday. Media-wise, and there are already hundreds of people signed up, and about 150 people came out to a training just last night, where we're breaking up into affinity groups. So if we get enough people out in the streets on Monday, September 23rd, then we're prepared to keep this going another day. Shut down more infrastructure, bring more people out, keep it going through the full week of climate action. Very much like you've seen, like you saw with Occupy and like you've seen with the Yellow Vest movement.
Okay, Nick Brana is here to raise awareness about the climate strike, the shutdown. StrikeDC.org. StrikeDC.org. Go to StrikeDC.org for all the information about the upcoming Shut It Down strike for climate change awareness in D.C. on September 23rd, but it's a whole week of action, September 20th through the 27th, and it's led by the youth, the people who actually are going to be affected by climate change the most. Isn't that something? So, yeah. So, Nick Brana, thanks again, and everybody check out Movement for a People's Party. And, we're always here. Whenever you need to come back, you're always welcome.
Thanks, Jimmy. Yeah, please come to the website, take the Pledge of Resistance. We're having weekly onboarding meetings, so see you there.
Okay. All right, buddy. Hey, our next live Jimmy Dore show is in Seattle, September 16th. That's a Monday. Plus, every Sunday in October, we're doing a live Jimmy Dore show at the Sycamore Tavern in Hollywood, California. Go to jimmydorcomedy.com for a link for all tickets and become a premium member. We give you hours of bonus material. Thanks for your support.